What if the battle that lit the modern world did not begin inside a laboratory, but in the shadow of death? On the 4th of January 1903, in a public park in New York, a massive elephant named Topsy stood before a crowd of spectators. Around her feet were ropes, in her body was poison, and waiting in the wires was a force humanity had only recently learned to command. Then the switch was thrown. A current of 6,600 volts surged through her body, the invisible power that could illuminate cities, drive machines, and awaken the industrial world passed through flesh and bone like a thunderbolt captured from the heavens. Within minutes, Topsy collapsed onto the cold ground. To the public, it was described as a humane execution, performed with the instruments of progress. But behind that spectacle was something far larger than one animal, one park, or one act of public violence. Behind it was a war over the future, a war between two visions of electricity, a war between Thomas Edison, the practical wizard of invention, and Nikola Tesla, the strange and visionary mind who believed that nature's deepest forces did not move in straight lines, but in waves, cycles, vibration and resonance. One man wanted to control electricity by forcing it into order. The other believed electricity had its own hidden language, and in that conflict, the modern world was born. But the question remains, how much of the story we were told is true? Was Edison truly the villain? Was Tesla truly the forgotten prophet? And did the so-called War of the Currents end with a clear winner, or with a myth powerful enough to shape history for more than a century? To understand this, we must go back before the cities glowed, before the electric chair, before Niagara Falls became a cathedral of power. We must return to the age when electricity was still mysterious, when the invisible world had only begun to reveal its laws. In the 1870s, Europe was wrapped in the smoke and iron breath of the Industrial Revolution. Factories roared like mechanical beasts, steam engines shook the ground, railways cut through mountains and cities. The modern age was rising, but it was rising through fire, coal and exhaustion. And somewhere inside that world, a young engineering student named Nikola Tesla was searching for something different. He was not yet the legendary figure later, surrounded by stories of lightning, wireless power, secret inventions and cosmic energy. He was still a young man with an unusual mind, a restless imagination, and an almost painful sensitivity to the hidden mechanics of nature. His first great turning point came in 1875, while he was studying at a technical school in Austria. There, Tesla encountered one of the most advanced electrical machines of the time, the Grammy dynamo. To most observers, it was a marvel. The machine could transform rotating mechanical motion into electrical current. It seemed like proof that humanity had finally begun to trap a fragment of nature's invisible power and put it to work. But Tesla did not see only a machine. He saw a contradiction. The current produced by rotation naturally changed direction. It moved in alternating pulses, like a tide, like a heartbeat, like the oscillation of a pendulum. Yet engineers had added a mechanical device to force that current into one direction. To the others, this was practical engineering. To Tesla, it was interference. He wondered, why force electricity to behave against its own nature? Why make a living wave march like a soldier in a straight line? In that moment, the seed of his great idea was planted. Perhaps alternating current was not a problem to be corrected. Perhaps it was the key. But the world around him was not ready for that thought. At the time, direct current was considered the obvious standard. It seemed easier to control, it seemed safer, it seemed more understandable. It moved in one direction, obeying the kind of logic engineers could measure, regulate, and sell. Tesla, however, had begun to suspect that the future did not belong to electricity held in a narrow channel. It belonged to electricity allowed to breathe. He did not yet know how to turn this intuition into a working system, but he believed, with growing intensity, that alternating current opened the door to a new principle, a principle that could transform the entire world. Still, vision alone does not pay tuition. By his second year, financial trouble forced Tesla to leave school before he had solved the problem that possessed him. The unfinished idea followed him like an electrical charge trapped in the mind, and soon, that charge would begin to consume him. Tesla later moved to Hungary and found work at a telegraph office. There, his talent became impossible to ignore. He advanced quickly, eventually becoming a supervisor of the system. He understood circuits, signals, timing, and transmission with rare precision. In a world where communication itself was becoming electrical, Tesla seemed almost born to read invisible impulses. But beneath his professional rise, something was wrong. The idea of alternating current would not leave him. It returned at night. It returned during work. It returned in moments of exhaustion. Again and again, Tesla imagined a machine that did not rely on sparks, brushes, and violent mechanical correction, but on something more elegant, a rotating magnetic field. To ordinary people, magnetism was invisible. To Tesla, it was geometry and motion. He worked relentlessly. He neglected rest. He neglected food. He pushed his body and mind beyond ordinary limits. The search for a solution became not merely an intellectual challenge, but an obsession. And then, at the edge of collapse, the answer appeared. Not in a workshop, not on a drafting table, not during a formal experiment. It came while he was walking in a park. In that moment, as the story is often told, the machine appeared in his mind with shocking clarity, not as a vague concept, not as a dream, but as a complete mechanism. He saw the coils. He saw the rotor. He saw the iron core. He saw the rotating magnetic field pulling motion out of invisible force. It was as if nature had opened a hidden diagram and allowed him to look inside. Tesla possessed an extraordinary ability to visualize inventions internally. He could imagine a machine in 3 dimensions, let it operate in his mind, test its parts, watch for friction, failure, imbalance, and inefficiency, all before a physical prototype existed. To many, this would sound like fantasy. To Tesla, it was method, and in that mental laboratory, the alternating current motor was born. This was not simply a new device. It was a new way of thinking about electricity. The machine did not force current into obedience. It used the natural rhythm of alternating current to create a magnetic field that rotated by itself. Motion from vibration, power from phase, rotation from invisible geometry. For Tesla, this was more than engineering. It was a glimpse into the hidden order of nature. 3 months later, he left Hungary and traveled to Paris, carrying the idea that would one day change civilization. There, he joined the European branch of the company founded by Thomas Edison, but no one around him seemed ready to understand what he had brought. In Paris, Tesla was still only a young engineer with an unusual accent, intense eyes, and ideas that sounded almost too abstract for the industrial world around him. To many of his colleagues, he was brilliant but strange. He spoke of alternating currents, rotating magnetic fields, and machines that existed first in the mind before they existed in iron. These were not the words of an ordinary technician. They were the words of a man listening to the universe as if it were a circuit. But Tesla understood a hard truth. People rarely believe what they cannot see. So he stopped merely describing the machine. He began building it. He rented space, gathered parts, and worked to construct the first prototype of his alternating current motor. When the device was complete, it behaved just as he had imagined. The magnetic field rotated, the motor turned, the theory became motion. For Tesla, it was proof. For the world around him, it was still too early. Europe was not prepared to embrace an invention that threatened the electrical systems already taking shape. Great ideas do not enter history simply because they are correct. They must arrive when money, infrastructure, ambition, and fear are aligned. And in Europe, the door remained closed. So, in 1884, Tesla made the decision that would change his life. He left the old continent and sailed to America. He arrived with little more than technical drawings, a letter of introduction, and only a few cents in his pocket. He had no secure home, no powerful allies, and no guarantee that anyone in this new world would listen. New York was rising into the age of steel, steam, finance, and ambition. To the city, Tesla was one more immigrant engineer trying to survive. But in his mind, he carried a system capable of reshaping the planet. At the same time, Thomas Edison was already one of the most famous inventors on Earth. To the public, Edison represented persistence, practicality, and the conquest of darkness. He was not a dreamer of invisible fields. He was a builder of working things. He gave people machines they could see, touch, buy, and use. And his greatest symbol was the electric light. At Menlo Park, Edison and his team had worked for months to create a durable, safe, practical incandescent bulb. After more than 1,000 failed experiments, Edison continued. In October 1879, he tested a carbonized filament made from bamboo brought from Japan. In an oxygen-free environment, the material became a stable carbon thread, capable of glowing for hours under ordinary conditions. The result was revolutionary. But Edison understood something many inventors did not. A light bulb alone was not enough. To bring electric light into daily life, he needed an entire system: power stations, wires, switches, meters, distribution networks, and business models. He was not merely inventing a lamp, he was inventing an electrical civilization. In 1882, at Pearl Street in Lower Manhattan, Edison's power station went into operation. It was one of the first commercial electric power systems in the world. At first, it served only about 80 buildings and powered a few hundred lamps, but within a few years, that number grew dramatically. The electric age had begun. For the first time, parts of American city life could continue after sunset without gaslight, flame, or darkness. Streets, offices, theaters, and homes began to glow with a new kind of fire, cold, controlled, modern. The press called Edison the Wizard of Menlo Park, and for a moment, it seemed as if he had conquered the night itself. But behind the triumph, there was a limit Tesla saw clearly. Edison's system was built on direct current. Direct current moved steadily in one direction. It was useful. It was controllable. It worked well over short distances. But it had a fatal weakness. It could not travel far without losing power. After only a short distance, voltage dropped significantly. To serve a growing city, Edison's system required many generating stations placed close to the customers they powered. Every district needed its own plant. Every expansion demanded more machinery, more copper, more maintenance, and more investment. The system could illuminate blocks, but could it illuminate a nation? Tesla believed the answer was no. Alternating current, by contrast, could be transformed to higher or lower voltages. High voltage could travel long distances more efficiently, then be reduced for safer local use. This made it possible to imagine something much larger than a cluster of isolated stations. A network, a grid, a continent connected by invisible force. Tesla understood that electricity was not merely a product, it was a system of movement. If one wished to command it, one had to understand not only the lamp at the end of the wire, but the journey of energy itself. To bring his idea into the world, Tesla needed to persuade the most powerful figure in the electrical industry, Thomas Edison. And so Tesla went to New York with extraordinary confidence. He was soon hired at Edison Machine Works, one of the most important centers for commercial electrical projects in America. From the beginning, Tesla impressed those around him with his direct manner, analytical intelligence, and capacity for solving difficult technical problems. One of his first major tests involved repairing the electric lighting system aboard the steamship Oregon. Tesla identified the problem and developed a solution within days. The precision of his measurements and the efficiency of his repair astonished the supervisors. Soon he was assigned to improve generators, troubleshoot electrical networks, and solve technical failures that others struggled to understand. He worked with discipline, intensity, and near-military focus. Edison respected ability, and Tesla had ability in abundance. But as the two men came closer professionally, the difference between their minds became clearer. Edison trusted experiment through repetition. Try thousands of materials, test every possibility, build, fail, adjust, build again. Tesla trusted mathematical vision. See the principle, construct the system internally, let the invisible laws guide the machine before the machine exists. Edison was the master of practical persistence. Tesla was the architect of electrical possibility. For a brief time, they worked under the same roof, but their visions of the future were moving in opposite directions. The conflict became unavoidable when Tesla was asked to improve an arc lighting system for a new urban district. Instead of simply refining the existing direct current approach, Tesla proposed using alternating current to increase transmission efficiency. To him, it was obvious. Why continue strengthening a system whose limitations were built into its foundation? Why add more weight to a bridge that could never cross the river? But Edison rejected the proposal. Officially, the idea did not fit the company's technical direction, but beneath that explanation was a larger reality. Edison had invested enormous amounts of money, labor, infrastructure, and reputation into direct current. His generators, lamps, meters, distribution equipment, and business empire were all built around that system. To accept alternating current would not merely mean adopting a new technology. It would mean admitting that the future might belong to someone else's idea. According to the famous version of the story, Edison then challenged Tesla to improve the efficiency of existing direct current machines and promised him $50,000 if he succeeded. Tesla threw himself into the task, redesigning components, recalculating circuits, reducing losses, and improving performance. When the work was done, he believed he had earned the reward. But when he asked for the money, Edison allegedly replied that Tesla did not understand American humor. The insult, if the story is accurate, cut deeply. Tesla left Edison Machine Works soon afterward. Whether every detail of that exchange happened exactly as later accounts describe remains debated. But in the mythology of the War of the Currents, that moment became symbolic. The visionary immigrant engineer, used and dismissed by the established industrial titan, and from that wound, a new determination emerged. Tesla would prove that direct current was not the true electrical future, but leaving Edison did not make him free. It made him poor. Without stable income, Tesla entered one of the darkest periods of his life. He took whatever work he could find. Some accounts describe him performing hard manual labor, even digging ditches, while trying to keep his dream alive. The man who could imagine machines of astonishing elegance found himself reduced to exhaustion in the streets of a city powered by other men's systems. But ideas, like currents, sometimes travel underground before they emerge. In 1886, a small group of investors helped Tesla establish a company in New Jersey. Its office stood near Menlo Park, close to the birthplace of Edison's legend. But the arrangement collapsed. Within months, the investors pushed Tesla aside and took control of the company bearing his name. Once again, the invention moved forward while the inventor was left behind. For many men, this would have been enough to destroy the dream. For Tesla, it was another phase in the experiment. In 1887, he began again. He opened his own workshop in Manhattan, and this time the invisible machine in his mind would become a force no one could ignore. By the spring of 1888, Tesla had secured a series of patents for his alternating current motor and transformer system. These were not minor improvements. They formed the architecture of a new electrical age. The motor, the transformer, the polyphase system, together they offered a method for generating, transmitting, and using electricity over great distances. Tesla had not simply invented a component, he had revealed a way to make electricity scalable. Then came the moment that changed everything. Tesla presented his work before the American Institute of Electrical Engineers at Columbia University. In the audience were engineers, investors, industrialists, and men who understood that the future of power was still undecided. Among them was George Westinghouse. Westinghouse was not an ordinary businessman. He had already transformed railroad safety with the air brake. He understood machinery, infrastructure, risk, and scale. He was not merely looking for a clever invention. He was searching for the system that could power a nation. And when he learned of Tesla's alternating current technology, he recognized something Edison had rejected. This was not a curiosity. This was the missing key. Westinghouse moved quickly. He invited Tesla to serve as a technical consultant and purchased the rights to his alternating current patents. The deal included cash, stock, and royalties tied to power sold through Tesla's technology. For Tesla, it was a vindication. For Westinghouse, it was a weapon. For Edison, it was a threat. The alliance between Tesla and Westinghouse brought together two forces history rarely grants at the same time: a visionary scientific mind and an industrial leader willing to gamble on the future. Alternating current was no longer a theory on paper. It now had capital, factories, engineers, ambition, and a path into the lives of millions. Before this, in 1886, Westinghouse-backed alternating current distribution had already begun in places such as Great Barrington, Massachusetts. But after Tesla entered the picture, the technology gained new coherence and power. Systems expanded. Factories took interest. Towns considered alternatives. Engineers began to reconsider assumptions that had seemed settled only a few years earlier. Newspapers wrote about alternating current systems capable of transmitting power over miles with far less loss than direct current. And with every new success, Edison's electrical empire looked more vulnerable. The war of the currents had begun, not as a polite technical disagreement, but as a battle for money, infrastructure, public trust, and the right to define the future. And this is where the story grows darker. Edison knew that technology alone does not decide history. Public perception does. A system may be efficient, elegant, and mathematically superior, but if people fear it, they will reject it. So the campaign against alternating current became a campaign against fear itself, or more precisely, a campaign to create fear. Edison and his allies argued that alternating current was dangerous. Because AC could be transmitted at high voltages, they portrayed it as a lethal force unsuitable for civilized life. The same property that made it efficient over long distances became the center of the attack. Soon, public demonstrations began. Animals were electrocuted in front of reporters. Dogs, cats, horses. The message was simple and brutal: alternating current kills. Electricity, which Tesla saw as a vast and subtle language of nature, was made to appear as an executioner. And then came the electric chair. At the time, New York officials were seeking a replacement for hanging. Edison suggested that alternating current should be used, arguing that it was deadly enough to kill quickly. In August 1890, William Kemmler became the first person executed by electric chair. The event was horrifying. The process did not proceed cleanly. The condemned man convulsed. His body burned. Witnesses were sickened. One observer reportedly suggested that an axe would have been more humane, but as propaganda, the damage was done. Alternating current became associated not only with danger, but with death itself. Tesla and Westinghouse now faced a crisis. They could argue, they could publish, they could defend the mathematics, but fear had entered the public imagination, and fear is not easily defeated by equations. The world had seen AC use to kill. Now Tesla and Westinghouse needed to show AC use to illuminate. They needed a demonstration so grand that no newspaper could ignore it, no engineer could dismiss it, and no citizen could forget it. That opportunity arrived in 1893, the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, a fair designed to celebrate progress, industry, science, architecture, and the American future. A city of white buildings, a spectacle of modern civilization, and at its heart, a challenge to light more than 100,000 electric lamps across the exposition grounds for months. This was not merely a contract, it was a stage. Whoever lit the fair would light the imagination of the world. By 1893, Edison himself had lost direct control of the company that carried his legacy in the electrical industry. His interests had merged into what became General Electric. General Electric entered the bidding for the Chicago Fair with a direct current proposal. The cost was enormous. Westinghouse, using Tesla's alternating current system, offered a solution at roughly half the price, with greater efficiency and superior transmission capability. The decision was clear. Westinghouse won. And in May 1893, when the fair opened, the world saw something extraordinary. The exposition grounds burst into light. Not a few lamps, not a street, not a building. An entire electric city. More than 100,000 lights glowed in coordinated brilliance, transforming the night into a vision of the coming century. Visitors walked beneath towers, domes, facades, fountains, and halls radiant with electrical power. It must have felt unreal. For generations, night had belonged to flame, moonlight, and darkness. Now the horizon itself seemed wired to a new star, and behind that radiance was Tesla's system. Alternating current had survived the propaganda of death and reappeared as a symbol of civilization. The fair became a turning point. People who had feared AC now saw it powering one of the greatest public spectacles in American history. Engineers who had doubted it now had proof on a monumental scale. Investors who had hesitated now understood that the future might not belong to Edison's direct current after all. But history was not finished. In the same year, another opportunity emerged, larger, more elemental, and almost mythic: Niagara Falls. For centuries, Niagara had thundered between the United States and Canada as a raw expression of nature's power. Millions of gallons of water crashed downward every minute, releasing energy that seemed beyond human command. To Tesla, it must have appeared as something more than a waterfall. It was nature's generator, a planetary engine, a place where gravity, motion, mass, and electrical imagination could be joined. The Niagara Falls Power Company announced plans to build the largest hydroelectric power plant in the world. General Electric again proposed a direct current approach, but the old problem remained. Direct current could not efficiently transmit power over long distances. Niagara's power was vast, but to matter, it had to travel. Tesla's alternating current system offered the answer. The project began in 1893. By 1895, power generated at Niagara was transmitted to Buffalo, nearly 25 miles away. It was a triumph of engineering, and several of the core patents used in the project belonged to Tesla. The invisible wave had conquered distance. The waterfall had become electricity. The future had chosen its current. With Chicago and Niagara, the war of the currents was effectively over. Thomas Edison, the great symbol of the early industrial electrical age, had to give way to the system Tesla developed and Westinghouse championed. Alternating current proved its superiority in long-distance transmission. It made wide-scale electrification possible. It allowed power plants to serve distant towns, factories, and cities. It became the foundation of the modern electrical grid. In that sense, Tesla won. But victory did not bring simplicity, because history is not written only from machines and patents. It is written from memory, myth, resentment, admiration, and the human need for heroes and villains. Over time, the story hardened into a dramatic legend. Tesla became the tragic prophet, brilliant, betrayed, robbed, forgotten. Edison became the ruthless industrialist, practical, cunning, cruel, willing to destroy a rival to protect his empire. The tale is powerful because it feels emotionally true. One man dreamed in invisible waves. The other sold light to the marketplace. One imagined a world connected by energy. The other built companies, systems, and commercial power. One died surrounded by loneliness and legend. The other became one of the most celebrated inventors in American history. But the truth, as often happens, is more complicated than the myth. Tesla's genius was not entirely ignored during his lifetime. From his student years onward, many recognized him as extraordinarily gifted. In 1896, the great scientist William Thomson, Lord Kelvin, praised Tesla's contributions to electrical science in remarkable terms. Tesla received honors, public attention, and professional recognition. His name was known. His demonstrations fascinated audiences. His work shaped industry at the highest level. And his relationship with Edison was not always the simple hatred later retellings suggest. One of the most prestigious honors Tesla ever received was the Edison Medal. If Edison had truly wished to erase Tesla completely, this recognition would have been difficult to explain. Many members of the award circles were connected to Edison or his professional world, yet Tesla received the medal. At the ceremony, Tesla expressed appreciation for the honor and spoke respectfully of Edison. He acknowledged Edison as an extraordinary man, someone without formal scientific training who nevertheless produced inventions of enormous influence. Tesla also recognized something deeper. Despite their differences, he and Edison shared a relentless devotion to work. Their methods were different, their philosophies were different, their temperaments were different, but both men were servants of invention, and that is where the mystery changes shape. The question is no longer simply, who won? The deeper question is, why did history need them to become enemies? Many of the sharper stories about Edison and Tesla gained strength after Tesla's death. A major influence came from the early biography written by John J. O'Neill, a journalist who knew Tesla in his later years. Published in 1944, the book helped shape the image of Edison as a scheming antagonist and Tesla as the betrayed genius. It included the famous story of Edison promising Tesla $50,000 and then dismissing the promise as a joke, but historians have questioned the likelihood of this event in the exact form it is usually told. The amount was enormous for the time. For a newly hired employee, such a bonus would have been astonishing. It was comparable to massive capital sums in the early Edison business world and would have represented decades of Tesla's income. This does not prove the story false, but it does mean caution is necessary. In the atmosphere of legend, facts can become symbols. A real disagreement can become betrayal. A harsh business reality can become personal villainy. A painful memory can become a myth repeated so often it feels like law. The same caution applies to the story of Topsy. For years, many people believed Edison personally stood behind the electrocution of the elephant in order to discredit alternating current. But the historical picture is not so simple. Topsy was executed in January 1903. By that time, the War of the Currents had effectively ended nearly a decade earlier. Edison no longer controlled the central electrical business in the same way. The decision to kill Topsy came from the management of the amusement park after the elephant had killed a trainer, following years of reported mistreatment. The method of execution was chosen as part of a grim public event, and the Edison Film Company recorded it. That does not make the event less horrifying, but it does make the common story less certain. The tragedy of Topsy became attached to the Edison-Tesla legend because it fit the emotional architecture of the myth. It gave the conflict a brutal image, a living creature destroyed by the same current Tesla wanted to give the world. But history is rarely that clean. Edison did participate in campaigns that portrayed alternating current as dangerous. The electric chair was indeed connected to the propaganda war. Animals were used in demonstrations. Fear was weaponized. Yet not every later event belongs directly to his hand. This is where mature history must separate evidence from drama. The mystery remains powerful, but power does not require exaggeration. In the end, the War of the Currents was not only a battle between two men, it was a battle between two ways of seeing nature. Edison saw the world as a workshop. Problems were solved through labor, repetition, materials, tools, and persistence. If something failed, test another filament, try another design, build until the world yields. Tesla saw the world as an invisible architecture. He believed nature was governed by rhythm, frequency, magnetism, vibration, and resonance. To him, the universe was not dead matter waiting to be forced into motion. It was already in motion. The task of the inventor was to understand the hidden music and tune the machine accordingly. One man made electricity practical, the other made it scalable. One brought light into rooms, the other helped carry power across distance. One built an empire of invention, the other gave the modern grid one of its essential principles. The old legend says Edison lost and Tesla won, but that is too small a conclusion. Edison did not vanish after the defeat of direct current. He continued to innovate and left a vast legacy in recorded sound, motion pictures, industrial research, and the culture of invention itself. Tesla did not need Edison as a villain in order to be great. His brilliance stands without a shadow behind it. His alternating current system, his motors, his transformers, his experiments with high frequency, and his vision of a world connected by energy remain among the most electrifying chapters in scientific history. The real tragedy is not that one man defeated another. The real tragedy is that history often remembers genius through conflict more easily than through complexity. We turn inventors into saints and monsters. We simplify battles into myths. We forget that progress is rarely pure. It is made of ambition and insight, generosity and ego, courage and error, illumination and darkness. And perhaps that is why the story still haunts us. Because electricity itself is invisible until it acts. It can light a city. It can power a home. It can drive industry, communication, medicine, and memory. But it can also burn, kill, and terrify. Tesla understood that invisible forces shape the visible world. Edison understood that inventions only change history when they become systems people can use. Between them stood a question that defined the modern age. How should humanity command the forces of nature? With control? With profit? With fear? With vision? Or with humility before powers we still do not fully understand? More than a century later, every glowing city, every humming transformer, every power line stretching across the horizon carries an echo of that struggle. Not the simple struggle of hero against villain, but the deeper struggle between what humanity can build and what humanity can misunderstand. The war of the currents ended, but the mystery of electricity did not. It still surrounds us, silent and unseen, flowing through walls, towers, wires, machines, and the fragile civilization we built upon it. And somewhere inside that invisible river, the names Tesla and Edison remain charged forever, two opposing poles in the same great circuit of history.